Imagine owning a property for years, only to be confronted by someone who claims you're trespassing on your own land. Sounds impossible, right? Well, this actually happened. In a shocking turn of events, an HOA Karen called the cops on me for trespassing on my own farm. She had no idea I was the legal owner. Stay with me as we dive into how this unthinkable situation unfolded and the incredible lessons it teaches about property rights, community conflicts, and the power of knowing your legal standing. The day began like any other, with plans to take care of the farm and manage the daily responsibilities that come with owning a piece of land. However, what should have been a peaceful morning quickly turned into a shocking and bewildering experience when I received an unexpected phone call. The person on the other end of the line claimed to be a member of the Homeowners Association, HOA, accusing me of trespassing on my own property. At first, I thought it was a joke or some kind of misunderstanding. Surely they had the wrong person, right? After all, how could I, the legal owner of the land, be trespassing on it? The initial shock of the phone call was quickly replaced by confusion. How could anyone accuse me of something so absurd? I knew the property inside and out. Every inch of it had been carefully maintained under my ownership for years. The farm had been passed down through generations, and I had the paperwork to prove that I was the rightful owner. I had every legal right to be there. So, how could someone from the HOA, someone who was supposed to be familiar with the community and its regulations, make such a claim? As the conversation continued, it became clear that the person on the other end was not backing down. The HOA member insisted that I was trespassing on my own land, and the call to law enforcement had already been made. This further added to my disbelief. How could a call to the police be made for something so baseless? I was being accused of something that, on the surface, seemed utterly ridiculous. It was as if my very presence on the property was being questioned by someone who had no understanding of the situation. The emotional impact of being wrongly accused of trespassing was immediate and intense. I felt a surge of frustration, followed by anger. The thought of someone questioning my legal right to be on my own land was infuriating. It wasn't just a matter of the accusation itself. It was the underlying assumption that I didn't belong there. As a property owner, I had invested time, money, and energy into maintaining the land. Yet, here I was, being told that my presence was unwanted and unlawful. It was a direct challenge to my identity as the rightful owner. Adding to the emotional turmoil was the confusion about how this situation had even come to be. I had always followed the rules and made sure that my property was properly managed. I was familiar with the HOA's guidelines and had maintained open communication with them in the past. Never had there been any indication that I was violating any rules. So how could I find myself in this situation? It felt like a personal attack, an unjustified attempt to undermine my authority as the legal owner of the farm. In the midst of this confusion, I found myself asking, who had made this accusation, and why? Was this some sort of isolated incident, or was it part of a larger issue with the HOA and their perception of property ownership? As the conversation unfolded, it became clear that the person who had initiated the complaint was a member of the HOA, someone who had apparently misunderstood the situation, or worse, was acting on personal bias or ignorance. The more I thought about it, the more absurd the situation seemed. The very idea that someone could call the police on me for simply being on my own property was a direct challenge to my rights. As the owner, I had the legal right to be there, and yet I was being treated as if I were some kind of intruder. It was as though my presence was unwelcome, simply because someone from the HOA had decided to question my authority. As the call came to an end, the full weight of the situation hit me. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a reflection of the larger power dynamics at play within the community. The HOA, which was supposed to regulate property management and ensure that everyone followed the rules, had somehow become an instrument of intimidation. I was being made to feel like an outsider in my own home, and that was a feeling I couldn't easily shake. The call had a lasting emotional impact, and I found myself reflecting on the broader implications of the situation. It wasn't just about the accusation, it was about the bigger issue of property rights, ownership, and the way people are treated based on their status within a community. The fact that I had to defend my right to be on my own land was a stark reminder of the challenges that property owners can face, especially when they are up against individuals or organizations that may not fully understand or respect their legal rights. In the aftermath of the phone call, I knew I had to act quickly to protect myself and my property. I needed to ensure that I was not only clear about my legal rights, but that I was also prepared to address any further misunderstandings. This wasn't just about proving my innocence, it was about asserting my authority as the rightful owner and standing up against the kind of injustice that could easily become a larger issue if left unchecked. The emotional toll of being accused of something so unjust was overwhelming, but it also fueled my determination to make sure that no one could undermine my rights as a property owner. This incident was more than just an inconvenience. It was a wake-up call to the complexities of property ownership, community dynamics, and the sometimes questionable actions of organizations like the HOA. The situation was far from over, but it had already left a lasting impact on me, both emotionally and mentally, as I prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Homeowners associations, HOAs, play a significant role in managing and regulating properties within a community. Their primary function is to enforce community rules and maintain the aesthetic and functional integrity of neighborhoods. While their intentions are often rooted in promoting a harmonious living environment, the authority they hold can sometimes lead to conflicts, particularly when property owners feel their rights are being infringed upon. The power an HOA wields over homeowners can sometimes go beyond the intended purpose of fostering community, leading to tensions and misunderstandings. In this case, the HOA's role in managing the community's property rules and regulations created a backdrop for the conflict that escalated into an accusation of trespassing. The HOA is responsible for maintaining the standards of the neighborhood, which includes ensuring that properties are properly maintained and residents are abiding by the rules. However, there are instances when their intervention can be seen as an overreach, particularly when they get involved in personal matters that fall outside the scope of their authority. Homeowners are expected to comply with HOA rules, but the question often arises about how much power an HOA should have in dictating personal behavior, and whether their role should extend into property ownership disputes. The conflict began when a member of the HOA, a woman known for her overzealous approach to enforcing community standards, took issue with the activities occurring on the farm. This woman, who we'll refer to as Karen, was someone with a reputation for being extremely strict about compliance with HOA regulations. She had a history of challenging neighbors on what she perceived as violations of the community's rules, often pushing for enforcement in a way that many found unreasonable. In her view, anything outside of the norm, anything that seemed like a potential breach of HOA policies, was grounds for intervention. Her involvement in this particular situation, however, was based on a series of misunderstandings. Karen had, for some reason, become convinced that the farm was being misused or that the property owner was engaging in activities that violated HOA regulations. It's important to note that these perceptions were based on assumptions, not on any factual evidence. There was no concrete reason for her belief that anything unlawful was happening on the farm. Her perspective was rooted in a desire to control and enforce compliance with the HOA's guidelines, which she felt were crucial for maintaining the integrity of the neighborhood. What she failed to understand was that the property in question was legally owned and the individual in question had every right to be on the land. The idea that the property owner was somehow trespassing on his own land was not only an exaggeration, but a complete misunderstanding of property rights. The breakdown of the misunderstanding lies in the nature of the HOA's role in regulating properties. Homeowners are often required to follow certain community standards, such as maintaining their property's exterior or adhering to rules about landscaping or even the type of structures allowed. However, this did not apply in the current situation. The property in question was a farm, and the activities being carried out were entirely consistent with the type of land being owned. The conflict arose from Karen's inability to differentiate between legitimate property ownership rights and her perception of what was appropriate in the community. She assumed that the farm owner was doing something wrong simply because it didn't align with her narrow view of what was acceptable. This led her to believe that the farm owner was trespassing on property that he rightfully owned. As the situation progressed, Karen's frustrations grew. Instead of addressing the issue in a civil manner or attempting to understand the situation, she chose to escalate it. The turning point came when she decided to call the police, accusing the farm owner of trespassing on his own property. This decision to involve law enforcement was not based on any real evidence of wrongdoing, but rather on a series of assumptions and misunderstandings. In her mind, calling the police was a way to bring authority into the situation, hoping that the law would support her viewpoint, even though there was no legal basis for her actions. The escalation to law enforcement involvement highlights a critical issue within communities governed by HOAs. When individuals in positions of power, such as HOA board members, make decisions based on assumptions rather than facts, it can lead to serious consequences. In this case, the police were called not because of any legitimate threat, but because of the wrongful belief that the property owner was committing a crime. The involvement of law enforcement not only exacerbated the situation, but also raised important questions about the role of HOAs in handling disputes. Was it right for Karen to call the police on someone simply for asserting their right to be on their own property? Could the situation have been resolved more calmly without the need for police intervention? The HOA's involvement, while initially intended to maintain community standards, created unnecessary tension. The power of the HOA to regulate and enforce property rules is important, but it must be exercised responsibly and with respect for individual property rights. When an HOA member allows personal biases to influence their actions, it can lead to situations where property owners are unfairly targeted, as seen in this case. Instead of fostering a sense of community, the HOA's role became an instrument of conflict, and the misunderstanding between the HOA member and the property owner escalated into a legal matter. In summary, the HOA's role in property management and community regulation is an essential one, but it must be balanced with respect for individual rights. In this case, the misunderstanding arose from an overzealous HOA member who allowed personal biases to influence her decisions. The escalation to law enforcement involvement was unnecessary and based on faulty assumptions. This situation highlights the potential for conflicts to arise when property rights are misunderstood and when the authority of an HOA is used in ways that infringe upon those rights. The ultimate lesson here is the importance of clear communication, understanding legal boundaries, and ensuring that any involvement by the HOA is grounded in facts, not assumptions. Property ownership is a fundamental legal right that confers not only the right to use and enjoy the property, but also the power to exclude others from using it. It is a core principle of law, ensuring that individuals have control over their land, homes, and other assets. In this context, property rights are central to determining who has the legal authority to make decisions about the use, management, and access to a piece of land or property. Ownership is established through legal documents such as deeds, titles, and contracts, which are recorded in public registers to confirm an individual's or entity's rightful ownership. One of the most crucial aspects of property ownership is the concept of legal ownership. Legal ownership means that an individual or entity has the recognized right to possess, control, and transfer the property. This right is protected by law and can only be transferred through legal processes such as sale, inheritance, or gifting. The legal owner has the authority to make decisions regarding the property, including who may or may not enter the property, what activities may take place, and whether the property can be altered or developed. In contrast, someone who is not the legal owner does not have the same rights and can be legally restricted from entering or using the property. When it comes to disputes like the one in this case, the legal ownership of the property is paramount. The situation became contentious because someone who was not the legal owner, or even fully aware of the ownership rights, misunderstood the property's status. The person in question assumed that the land in question was being used improperly simply because it did not conform to her expectations. This misunderstanding, rooted in a lack of knowledge about the property rights of others, led to an unjust accusation of trespassing. In reality, the individual accused of trespassing was the rightful owner of the land, and his right to be there was never in question. A common misconception about property ownership is that anyone who occupies or uses land can claim ownership. However, ownership is not simply a matter of presence. A person cannot legally claim ownership of a property just by occupying it or living on it, even if they maintain the land for some time. Ownership must be established through proper legal channels, and those records must be publicly accessible to prove that the person has the legal right to the land. This misconception can lead to confusion in property disputes, where people might assume that anyone who is using the land is the owner, even if the official records say otherwise. This misunderstanding was at the heart of the dispute here, as the individual who called the police failed to recognize that the property owner had every legal right to be there, regardless of her assumptions. Furthermore, some people mistakenly believe that property ownership grants them the right to control everything that happens within a certain vicinity, including property boundaries that extend beyond what is legally defined. While property owners do have control over their land, their rights are limited by local laws, zoning regulations, and easements. For example, someone may not have the right to build anything on their land that violates local zoning codes or disrupts public utility systems. However, these limitations do not extend to basic ownership rights, such as the right to access and use one's property. In this case, the misunderstanding occurred because the HOA member did not recognize that the property owner's legal rights superseded any personal or subjective interpretation of community rules. Legal ownership matters profoundly in disputes like these because it provides a clear framework for resolving conflicts. In a situation where an HOA or another party is questioning whether a person has the right to be on a specific piece of land, the legal documents supporting ownership are the ultimate authority. A person's legal right to their property cannot be overridden by personal opinions, misunderstandings, or arbitrary interpretations of rules. The only time an owner's right to their property might be disputed is if there is a challenge to the validity of the legal documents themselves, such as in cases of fraud, misrepresentation, or unclear title transfers. Otherwise, legal ownership grants the individual full control over the land, and they are entitled to use it as they see fit within the bounds of the law. This misunderstanding highlights an important issue in property rights enforcement, which is the gap between perception and reality. Many people, including those who are part of regulatory bodies like HOAs, often confuse their interpretation of what is acceptable with legal ownership rights. In this case, the individual who made the complaint about trespassing mistakenly assumed that her authority as an HOA member allowed her to decide who had the right to be on the land, without regard to the legal ownership of the property. This kind of confusion undermines the legal framework that governs property ownership, leading to potential conflicts and injustices. Property rights enforcement must be rooted in an understanding of the law and the importance of respecting legal ownership rather than relying on subjective judgment. Additionally, it is essential that all parties involved in property disputes understand the importance of documentation. Legal ownership should be clearly supported by official records and should be accessible to anyone who may question ownership. This helps to prevent misunderstandings and ensures that conflicts are resolved fairly. In cases like this, where a Misunderstanding has occurred. It is crucial that legal documents such as the deed or property title be presented to affirm ownership rights. The failure to do so can result in unnecessary legal complications and exacerbate tensions between property owners and others, such as HOA members, who might be unaware of the proper procedures for addressing disputes. The core lesson here is the need for education and awareness surrounding property rights, particularly within communities that are governed by organizations like HOAs. It is essential for individuals in these positions to understand that legal ownership rights cannot be disregarded based on personal perceptions. In the absence of clear legal disputes, it is critical that everyone involved respects the legal rights of property owners. This ensures that property rights are upheld and the process for resolving disputes is fair, transparent, and based on objective legal standards. Without this respect for legal ownership, conflicts like this will continue to arise, leading to unnecessary stress, frustration, and legal complications for all parties involved. Being wrongly accused of trespassing on your own property is an experience that takes a considerable emotional toll, especially when the accusation comes from an entity that is supposed to manage community relationships, like a homeowners association, HOA. The feeling of being unfairly targeted is not just frustrating, it is mentally exhausting. When a property owner is accused of something so irrational, it can lead to feelings of confusion, disbelief, and helplessness. The stress of having to defend your legal rights and prove your innocence in such a situation often impacts a person far beyond the immediate moment. For the individual in this case, the emotional effects of being falsely accused were deep and pervasive, stretching into personal relationships, mental well-being, and the overall social dynamics within the community. One of the first emotional reactions in such an unfair accusation is the sense of betrayal. When a member of the community, in this case, a member of the HOA, is the one raising the alarm, it can be especially hurtful. The HOA is supposed to be a governing body that enforces rules to ensure a peaceful community, not a source of conflict. The accusation of trespassing, a direct challenge to one's ownership and authority, feels like a personal attack, not just an inconvenience. It's an emotional blow to have someone question your place and rights in the very community you've contributed to. It undermines your sense of belonging, causing alienation, and further strains relationships, especially with neighbors or community members who may be influenced by these false accusations. In addition to the personal hurt, there is the strain. This places on broader community relationships. In any neighborhood, neighbors are supposed to support each other and collaborate to create a harmonious environment. However, when a false accusation like this arises, it can create division. Even if the rest of the community recognizes the absurdity of the claim, there will always be lingering doubts. This creates an atmosphere of tension where the accused feels like they must justify their actions, not just to the HOA, but also to the neighbors and community members who may have heard about the situation. Trust is often shattered in the process, making it difficult for the individual to continue feeling like a valued member of the community. The legal system adds another layer of emotional distress. Navigating through accusations, even those without merit, means engaging with law enforcement or legal entities, which can feel like an overwhelming task. Even when you know you are in the right, the process of dealing with law enforcement can be draining. The process of explaining your rights, presenting evidence, and answering questions, all while dealing with the emotional weight of being accused of something you didn't do, can create a sense of frustration and powerlessness. It is mentally exhausting to realize that, despite having all the necessary legal documents to prove your ownership, you are forced into a position where you need to defend yourself against something as baseless as trespassing on your own property. Dealing with the HOA Karen, someone who takes it upon herself to enforce rules with extreme zeal and little regard for facts, only adds to the strain. People like this often act based on personal biases or a perceived sense of authority, and they disregard the consequences their actions may have on the lives of others. Their actions not only disrupt the lives of those directly involved, but also contribute to the further polarization of the community. When HOA members or individuals in positions of authority abuse their power, it is incredibly challenging to maintain a healthy emotional state. The frustration is compounded by the realization that these individuals are often not held accountable for the harm they cause. For the person who is wrongly accused, finding ways to diffuse tension without escalating the situation becomes crucial. The emotional toll of such a situation can lead to a desire to retaliate, to fight back with equal force. However, this approach rarely yields positive outcomes. Instead, maintaining composure and focusing on resolving the issue calmly and logically is the most effective course of action. By staying level-headed, the individual can ensure that they present themselves as the responsible party, not someone who is looking to escalate the conflict. Engaging in open, honest communication is key to diffusing tension, as it allows both sides to hear each other's perspective and, ideally, come to a resolution that benefits everyone. One important aspect of handling such accusations is focusing on the facts. In situations like this, it is essential to calmly present legal documentation and proof of ownership. The facts should be allowed to speak for themselves, as they provide the irrefutable basis for one's right to be on the property. However, it's equally important to maintain a respectful tone and approach, even when dealing with someone who may not be acting fairly. Escalating the situation with anger or defensiveness only fuels further conflict. It's critical to stay focused on the facts and on resolving the issue in the most peaceful and efficient manner possible. Through this experience, several key lessons can be learned about standing your ground in such situations. The first and most important lesson is the value of knowing your rights and being prepared to defend them. In property disputes, having the necessary legal documentation on hand is essential. It is not enough to simply assume that your rights will be respected. You must be proactive in ensuring that you have the documentation to prove your claims. Being informed and confident in your legal standing helps in diffusing misunderstandings and resolving disputes without unnecessary confrontation. The second lesson is the importance of emotional resilience. Being falsely accused can shake your sense of self and your confidence in your community, but it is crucial to stay emotionally grounded. Reacting impulsively or with anger can only serve to fuel the situation. Instead, it is better to approach the conflict with a level-headed mindset, taking the time to process emotions and respond thoughtfully. This emotional resilience allows you to stand firm in your rights without letting the situation negatively affect your mental health. Finally, this experience teaches the importance of understanding the role of authority in community matters. In situations where HOA members or community leaders are overstepping their bounds, it is vital to engage with the right channels to address the issue. Rather than letting personal biases or unfair actions go unchecked, it's important to take the necessary steps to address them through formal complaints, legal avenues, or public forums. By standing up against unjust authority, you not only protect your rights but also help to ensure that the community remains a fair and just place for all its members. In conclusion, the emotional toll of being wrongly accused can be significant, but it is possible to navigate through these challenges with the right mindset and approach. By remaining calm, standing firm in your rights, and engaging with the situation thoughtfully, you can diffuse tension, protect your reputation, and learn valuable lessons about legal ownership and community dynamics. The experience may be difficult, but it also serves as a reminder of the importance of standing up for what is right, even in the face of adversity. The resolution of this situation came after a period of intense frustration and confusion. The individual at the center of the dispute, the rightful property owner, was able to present clear and irrefutable legal documentation proving their ownership of the farm. Once this documentation was provided to the HOA and law enforcement, the situation quickly unraveled. The police, upon reviewing the legal documents, understood that the accusation of trespassing was baseless. The rightful owner had every legal right to be on their property, and the matter was immediately resolved with no further legal action required. The HOA member who initiated the false accusation, upon realizing the error, acknowledged their mistake, and the situation was diffused without any lasting legal consequences for the property owner. However, this resolution didn't come easily. The process of establishing ownership rights and clearing up the misunderstanding required patience, clear communication, and a firm understanding of property laws. The false accusation was eventually rectified, but it highlighted some key lessons for the property owner and the broader community on the importance of legal knowledge, documentation, and communication. One of the most crucial lessons learned from this incident was the importance of understanding and keeping thorough documentation of property rights. The legal documents, such as the property deed, title records, and any relevant contracts, were the key to resolving this dispute quickly and effectively. Without these documents, the property owner could have found themselves in a prolonged legal battle, facing mounting stress, time, and potential costs. This serves as a reminder that every property owner should ensure their legal rights are well documented and accessible. These records not only protect an individual's rights, but also provide clear evidence in the event of misunderstandings or conflicts, preventing issues from escalating unnecessarily. Additionally, the situation underlined the significance of community interaction and transparency. Homeowners associations, HOAs, are in place to maintain the integrity of a neighborhood, but they also have a responsibility to ensure that their actions are just and fair. In this case, the HOA member who initiated the call to the police did so without understanding or respecting the legal rights of the property owner. Although the situation was ultimately resolved without significant consequences, it raised questions about the ways in which HOA members enforce rules and interact with homeowners. HOAs must be aware of their power and ensure they do not overstep their boundaries or act out of personal biases. Clear communication between homeowners and HOAs is essential to prevent misunderstandings, and it is important for everyone involved to recognize that legal rights take precedence over personal opinions or assumptions. The emotional and mental toll of such a situation cannot be understated. Being accused of trespassing on your own property not only impacts one's sense of personal security, but also places undue stress on their social and familial relationships. The process of defending one's rights and the damage caused by a false accusation can be long-lasting, even after the situation is resolved. Moving forward, it is important for individuals in such situations to prioritize their emotional well-being. Seeking support from family, friends, and legal professionals can help alleviate the stress that comes with being unfairly accused and ensure that individuals do not face these types of conflicts alone. Engaging in stress management techniques and focusing on maintaining healthy boundaries in interactions with others can also help in dealing with the emotional impact. Another lesson is the importance of standing firm in one's legal rights while maintaining a calm and respectful demeanor. In any situation where a property owner's rights are being questioned, it's essential to respond with patience and factual evidence rather than reacting impulsively. While it may be tempting to retaliate emotionally, maintaining a composed approach helps de-escalate the situation and encourages a resolution that is grounded in the law. This approach not only resolves disputes more efficiently, but also helps maintain the integrity of one's reputation and relationships within the community. Beyond the immediate resolution, this situation teaches broader lessons about how to prevent similar incidents in the future. First and foremost, property owners should stay informed about their legal rights and the rules that govern property ownership in their specific area. This includes understanding zoning laws, property boundaries, and the rights granted by deeds and titles. In communities where an HOA is present, it's also essential to familiarize oneself with the HOA's regulations and procedures to ensure compliance and prevent any accidental violations. Keeping an open line of communication with the HOA, especially regarding any plans for the property, can help avoid conflicts and build a relationship based on mutual respect. Moreover, it's important for property owners to proactively address any potential issues with neighbors or community members. If there is an issue with how a property is being used or managed, it's often best to address it early before misunderstandings can escalate. This can involve speaking directly with neighbors or HOA members to clarify intentions and ensure that everyone is on the same page. Building a community of understanding and cooperation can go a long way in preventing disputes and ensuring that everyone's rights are respected. In cases where conflicts do arise, property owners should be prepared to act quickly and decisively. Having legal documentation on hand and ready to present is key to clearing up any misunderstandings. Engaging legal professionals when necessary can help expedite the process and ensure that one's rights are fully protected. It's also important to keep a record of all communications with the HOA, neighbors, and any relevant authorities. This documentation can serve as evidence in case of further disputes and ensures that property owners are not left vulnerable to false accusations or unjust claims. Ultimately, the key takeaway from this experience is the importance of protecting one's legal rights and being proactive in addressing potential issues before they become bigger problems. Property ownership is a valuable right that should be respected, and anyone who faces disputes should feel empowered to stand up for their rights without fear of unfair treatment. This experience serves as a reminder of how critical it is to know and defend one's legal standing while also striving for peaceful and respectful community interactions. By learning from this situation and taking steps to protect property rights, individuals can help prevent similar incidents in the future and foster an environment where everyone's rights are recognized and respected. Stand up for your rights and protect your property. Subscribe to the HOA Stories for more insights on how to navigate legal challenges and ensure your voice is heard in your community.